So before I show you where Dan is missing in Revelation and why he's missing, let me show you something now that Dan is also connected to that you're already now highly familiar with. For behold, I will send serpents, cockatrices among you, which will not be charmed, and they shall bite you, saith the Lord. So, how can I show you this? How can I show you that this is in the last days, that this is our time, and that's exactly what the Bible's saying? How can I show you that these horses from Dan, the pale horse, as you see it in the watermark, how can I get you to understand that these Pleiadians, as they're represented as these tall, white, Nordic, pale, what was Quetzalcoatl? A pale-skinned man. And then here we have this pale horse, and death, and hell. Have you ever thought about that? And then now we have Dan as connected at these end times. You know, the snorting of the horses. Well, Dan's the pale horse. Dan is going to be these white Nordic type alien beings that are going to try to, in the beginning, fool everyone, but they're going to end up coming outright telling you that they're biblical judges right out the Bible, just as I'm going to show you right here. And there's going to be no refuting it. So now you understand they're connected to these cockatrices. You already know intimately what we're talking about. So the only thing is to understand this mystery of Revelation, in which here in chapter 12, starting at verse 4, as we look through the tribes that are sealed in the last days, which means we're in the last days, and supposedly there's supposed to be 144,000, 12,000 of each of the 12 tribes. 12 times 12,000 is 144,000. It's supposed to be 144,000 select and special ones selected, as the Bible would say, that are going to be sealed. No harm is going to come to them. The Bible calls them the saints. Well, guess what? There are no saints. There are no perfect people. But it just so happens that once again, if this is the end times connected at the end days, the close of an age, well, guess what? You know about this calendar and its connection to the end times, the end days, the close of an age. Well, guess what this calendar is made up of? Baktuns. Guess how many Baktuns it takes to complete one world age? 13. A Baktun is 394 years. Well, it just so happens to take 12 times 12,000 days, which makes 144,000 days to make 394 years. Thus, one Baktun. Incredibly enough. So it just so happens to be that we've got more of a connection here than people are willing to admit or willing to see. Most of them are denying. There's more that I can show you with that calendar, but we have to move on. As we see, there's no Dan here, friends. Go look for yourself. And I'm going to show you the reason why no Dan is there, and why you see Dan being depicted this way in the last days as a very unpleasant fellow. Well, let's just take it right on back to the beginning, and let's look for it right out of the words of Israel's mouth. Jacob. Jacob is going to give us his dying blessing in chapter 49 of Genesis for what he sees in the future for the 12 tribes, his descendants. And as we see, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path, that biteth the horse heels, so that his rider shall fall backward. Well, let's just move forward to Moses in his dying blessing and see what he has to say about Dan in the last days. And of Dan he said, Dan is a lion's whelp. He shall leap forth from Bashan or Bashan. Well, it just so happens that Bashan or Bashan is the land of the giants. And it just so happens that this whole thing is connected with these Anunnaki, which are just actually supposed to be giants themselves. And this just so happens to be Nergal, the representation of actually a Danite itself. I'll be back.